Enough of that, though. Let's go down to the feature match area.
Yeah, so our first feature match area is Andrea Mengucci of Channel Fireball fame and going to be playing the Pro Tour next weekend. He is on Bant Lotus Field. And then we have Sebastain Jaje on that Azorius control deck that we mentioned earlier. So it looks like they've started for the first few turns. Looks like Mengu's just setting up his lands here with a Aspara's Headquarters and a Lair of the Hydra. And this is a lot of playing lands and passing turns, which seems quite familiar for this matchup.
Yeah, this is a situation where if you have played a lot of Pioneer, you have probably played this matchup before. Mengu is playing the combo version of Bant Lotus for the record. Just there are some Bant Lotus decks that are trying to be more controlling. We've seen typically. Mengucci is playing hidden strings in this deck. So this is a combo versus control matchup, not a control v control mirror, which might appear as the start of this game.
Yep. So it looks like we cycled away a Shark Typhoon. So we have a nice Shark just to put on an early clock because there's going to be a lot of tapping out and a little bit of dirtling from the Bant Lotus field deck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it looks like Andrea Mengucci, if you haven't seen this deck in a while, there have been some innovations to this deck. The biggest one being Dragon Lord Dromoka in the main deck now. That used to be a sideboard card, but really showing that players are giving No More Lies a lot of respect and wanting to have, can't be countered threats in the main deck and try and cut off those powerful cards.
Yeah, for sure. So it just looks like Sebastain is just going to keep playing lands and just keep turning sideways with this Shark token. Until Mengucci finds the right time to pop off this combo in the face of many counter spells. It seems there is an absorb in Sebastian's hand as well there.
Oh my goodness, we have a castle activation. The game's over, Mengu. He's up a card.
Yep.
Back him up.
He's trying to put on some kind of clock here. This Field of Ruin is looking a little sad, but never mind. Sebastian's just going to keep getting aggressive. Because you need to close out this game somehow, and with all the lands that Sebastain has in play, there's plenty of interaction here. So, yeah.
One thing about this matchup, if you haven't played it very much, is that while Mengucci hasn't been doing much, there's not much clock. Sebastain is going to take a while to win, and that's actually one of the reasons I joke about the castle. But it is actually putting a clock on Mengucci. And if we didn't have this castle, it'd be a 20-turn clock compared to a 6-turn clock now.
Absolutely. Trying to see what's in Sebastian's hand here. I just don't think there's much else to do outside of just keep attacking. So Mengu goes down to 14.
Yeah, it looks like Sebastain just has counter spells, a Supreme Verdict, and it's a Teferi. And maybe a Wandering Emperor that might be a March. But one of the big things here actually is that Supreme Verdict. If Mengu spends a turn, tapping out for Dragon Lord Dromoka, it's not Sebastian's favorite play, but getting that off the board so that he can fight over the ritual effects is pretty important.
And here comes that Teferi that we mentioned. Just going to draw some cards and tap some lands. Is pretty good with No More Lies and, absorb. Just slowly accruing value throughout the game.
Yeah, and this is a matchup where Absorb really kind of comes to get you a little bit, where it's not as powerful as something like Urtai Scorn, which we have seen some blue-white control players jump to over the last couple of days, but they both are very different and helpful in different matchups. Sebastain was playing against Mono Red, which is a deck we're seeing a little bit more of thanks to Lightning Helix. You'd be very happy to have Absorb and not have Urtai Scorn, where against Mengu, when he's going to try and cast 5 spells in one turn, you kind of wish you had a 2-mana counter, and that's kind of the interesting part of this format as we're getting into it, is how do we play around all these different things and how do we best position ourselves?
Yeah. Looks like Mengu is going to start things off. All right.
I love this play from Mengucci.
Yep, so it looks like Mengu is casting a Hidden Strings targeting Sebastian's lands just to force a counter spell or force some investment in mana here.
Yeah, and this is an awkward spot where, Teferi does give you about a mana back, and we have a lot of counter spells, but unfortunately we don't have the mana to cast a bunch of them, so the shields are down.
Yeah, this is a really sweet play. Not one that I would have considered, but the best way to take a control player out of the game is just making them use their resources, giving them a tricky decision.
Oh, interesting moment here. I think Sebastain didn't float the mana, so Mengu gets the 1 extra. From the pool. Okay, so might have been a small misstep there, but probably if Mengu was going for that line, he had the mana either way, most likely. So probably not something to lose much sleep over.
Yeah. And it looks like Mengu's going to cast another Hidden Strings, tapping his lands this time. And then it looks like we've got a Ultimatum on the way. We can get behind that card glare. Oh no, we've got an Omniscience. Okay, this is where things get pretty serious. And considering Sebastain is tapped out, thanks to that aggressive play from Mengu earlier. And here we go. So we've got a Chandra in play. And it looks like Mengu's going to try and lock out the win here.
Yeah, and if you haven't seen this before, Chandra copies the first Instant Sorceries play. That's going to copy this Ultimatum. And then Mengu's going to get, basically an unbeatable, pile combination because he gets 2 Ultimatums. And we have the Omniscience down, nothing up. So the long story short is Mengu is going to do this a couple times and then eventually start using Chandras to fireball the opponent and kill them. And you just pick them up with regrowth effects that are in the deck. Like Balagad's Recovery, which double as a land in this deck.
Yeah. It looks like Sebastain hasn't quite seen the combo for a while, so he's just forcing Andrea Mengucci just to go through the motions to make sure he has it, which seems to be the case here.
Yeah, it's also worth noting Sebastain could have that. We weren't sure what the card was in hand, but if it is March of Otherworldly Light, which does seem to be flicked to the front, Sebastain can pitch multiple cards in hand to get rid of the Leer. The big problem is the Omniscience play, which is going to really, put Mengucci in a position to fight through most of it, and we will get 1 Leer cast before things end. But Sebastain does technically have some plays, but this is some real letter of the law stuff.
Yeah, it's going to take a lot for Sebastain to get out of this. It looks like we're just figuring things through. So when it comes to this matchup, Mason, who do you favor here? Not in the game itself right now, but in Bant versus Bant Lotus Field or Azorius Control, who do you actually favor here?
Yeah, so I think typically the Bant Lotus Field deck is slightly favored if there isn't any pressure. Look, we saw this game, Sebastain actually did a really good job of applying pressure and putting Mengu on a clock, and that is why I think the deck is normally favored, because Azorius Control has a lot of cards that are good against Bant Lotus Field, but you have to have the, time that Bant Lotus Field can't just power through them and overwhelm you on a single turn, because it can generate so much mana, and there are cards like Hidden Strings that sometimes you're not supposed to counter, and you are supposed to counter, depending on sort of their hand, and there's no real way for you to know outside of, paying a lot of close attention during the match. So that is all to say, as we see Mengu here sort of going through the motions. Typically, I think Sebastian's deck has the tools to beat Mengu, but he has to be very careful about playing them. I think tapping out for the Teferi is a very reasonable line, but it puts us in a position where stuff like this can occur. And I think it's maybe, a spot where there's lots of times where I think some players maybe would have held because they had multiple counters in hand. So it's a really awkward position to walk through, and it only gets worse and worse when it comes to tapping out for the Teferi. So I do like that Sebastain, if he was going to do it, did it sooner than later, because that makes it harder for Mengu to go for it. Yeah,
for sure. And there we go. Sebastian's seen enough, and it looks like we'll be shuffling up and going towards game 2 very soon. That was a very, very quick game 1. And a very great play from Andrea Mengucci there, tapping down Sebastian's lands with the Hidden Strings.
Yeah, and that kind of stuff really matters in these decks.
Okay, then. So we're going to go to sideboarding. So what do you like the look of here from Sebastian's deck? There's some nice interaction in the sideboard. What would you pick?
Yeah, so there's a couple cards that really jump out right away. You want those Damping Spheres. That's going to turn off the Lotus Field itself, not allow it to create lots of mana. We really enjoy that. Test of Talents is a great way to get rid of the ultimatums out of the deck. Rest in Peace is actually not so bad in this matchup because, as we just saw, a lot of Mingu's easiest wins involve using the graveyard with Leer and, Bala gets recovering. The deck can win without that happening, but it basically is a huge roadblock. And we also have cards like Dovin's Veto that I'm a pretty big fan of bringing in. Hullbreaker Horror makes it sometimes awkward to go for the combo and is a flash threat. And we talked about wanting to leave our mana up a lot. So those are some of the cards that jump out to me. I could even see the Memory Deluge coming in over something like a Teferi so that we don't end up in an awkward position of tapping out again.
Yeah. You just want to be, so you're saying you want the control player to just be as reactive as possible when the Bant Lotus player is just perhaps trying to combo off, or you want to force them to do things.
Yep, exactly. I could even see Tishana's Tidebinder coming in. I'm sure it actually hits something that I'm forgetting, but even just being like 3-2 flash, we talked about the big problem is, Sebastain has the cards to stop Mengu, but it's really about making it about the time and trying to turn into a Delver deck. That is sort of Sebastian's goal. Okay, yeah.
And going to Mengucci's list, what do you like from Mengucci's sideboard to bring in against Azorius Control?
Yeah, so there's a couple cards that are pretty powerful here. Like an extra Chandra can go a long way. And just having more things to kind of force a counter on, just another, you only have so many copies of them, but by having the extra one, you get to eat a counter spell. Silence is a big card. That's going to allow us to basically force a counter spell on that. Dragon Lord Dramoka, essentially the exact same thing, but a creature. And also, we talked about how Rest in Peace can make things weird. This one really helps. Ketsu Malamir's Exemplar, I believe is how you say this card's name. It is the green-white cat in the sideboard. This one makes it so your opponent can only cast spells during your opponent can't cast spells during your turn, So it basically provides like a Teferi Time Rival-esque effect on a 3-drop. That is really good as something we can play early and just cut off counter magic. And that's going to force, Sebastain to leave in some amount of removal or all these effects that turn that off. And then we have Narset's Reversal, which is actually a great way to win a counter war because it's basically a cheap version of a counter spell where they go to counter your spell and then you reversal your own spell. So you don't ever hit their counter spell. You want to hit your own spell to put it back on the stack most often and force them to have another counter.
Yeah. So it's going to be a really interesting game too. Before we get into the second game of this match, how have you felt Archdruid's Charm from Murders of Karlov Manor? Because we've talked a lot about how No More Lies is like a really big boost to Azorius Control. How has Archdruid's Charm changed like the Lotus Field decks? Because Mengu's running 4 of them in his list.
Yeah, I haven't seen a ton, but I really love the theory. Basically, the idea is it's more copies of our Lotus Field that we get to put into play at instant speed. That matters a ton. And once we get a Lotus Field into play, often we want a Thespian stage. So this gives us more copies of that. And we talked about how the big problem is, hey, the opponent has all the counter spells, right? And we need to fight through those from our side. And assuming they don't have a clock, that's easy, but they do have problems. Archdruid Charm, normally maybe not a card you want to counter because just a land, but it might jump you ahead so many turns that it then constricts the counterspell mana more, so they might have to fight over it more. And it also, it destroys artifacts and enchantments, so it's a great out to something like Damping Sphere, something like Rest in Peace. So this is a really modal card. I really like it, and I think it's a big sign that we're seeing players like Mengu and a couple other players. I don't want to name names, but we have some other pro players playing the exact same deck list in the tournament this weekend, and they are also playing 4 of the Charm. So that's a sign to me that they really think this card is worth the slots. This deck has a lot of access to cards, and so they very easily could play 2 or 3 of these and basically always have one during a game. So saying they want 4 to me is like, hey, this card is really, really good. I want to draw it every single game.
Right, this is it. And modular cards like these tend to be really good because they're really a dead draw. You can do all kinds of things. And the triple green is just like fine in Lotus Field because you have the Lotus Fields that pay for it. So it just seems like a slam dunk. And it's really, really cool just to see Murders of Karlov Manor having a good impact on Pioneer. And as we mentioned at the top of the show, how, Pioneer's been on the back burner because, there's not the RC format or the RCQ format right now. So seeing these Murders of Karlov Manor cards like seep in and have a notable impact is really cool to see, considering the format is on the back burner until today.
Agreed, yeah. And I think, as we're heading down to the future match area, as these players are resolving their mulligans, players have really underestimated Murder at Karlov Manor when it comes to a set's power level. It's definitely a set that is deceptively strong. There are a lot of cards that have lots of small edges, And it's not something kind of like, like when you look at a Modern Horizon sets, it's like, okay, these cards are strong. These cards are like, there's a lot of utility in them.
Yeah, I found Murders of Carlisle Manor to have some really powerful, like, commons and uncommons. I know we tend to highlight the rares and mythic rares when it comes to a standard release, but you've got stuff like No More Lies that we've already discussed. Insidious Roots is a really fun card from Murders of Carlisle Manor that looks to be fun. Novice Inspector is another really good one. Pick Your Poison. Like, there's these cards that are, they're not going to be, oh my god, these are amazing, but they're going to play like a certain role within existing decks, such as Boris Convoke.
Yeah, and I think we're actually going to see a lot of that, Emma, and I think a part of that is due to play boosters. From like a design standpoint, It changes the way you have things go. So I think we're going to see more cards like that going forward, where we just need to have a little extra utility because the amount of like commons and uncommons and things are thrown off and draft a little to what we're traditionally used to. I think that's why you see cards like Pick Your Poison being in the set and being so powerful.
For sure. So Sebastain is going through his mulligans. I do see a Damping Sphere in his opening hand, which is a very good card against the Bant Lotus field deck.
Yeah, that is the card Sebastain is looking for. Mengu, obviously, whenever you play this Lotus field deck, your opponent has Damping Sphere. And if your opponent doesn't, it doesn't matter. You can bring in a card to fight over it, and it's like, okay, cool. My deck works very easily if you don't have that card in play.
Okay, then. So Andrea Mengucci just played a Balaged Recovery tapped, flipping the land side there. So we'll go back to Sebastain. Figuring out what to do here. Like, it's really tempting just to pop off this Damping Sphere and just pin that down and pin down the inevitable Lotus field that will be coming.
Yeah, and I mean, for Sebastain too, we talked about it last game. He was willing to go for the Teferi early. Playing it early is a really good line unless you're trying to fight over an early type of creature.
Okay. So Mengucci started off with a Razorflesh Thicket and is going to get a Sylvan Scrying and probably going to find that Lotus field. And this leads Sebastain just to slam that Damping Sphere without any interaction.
Yeah, I actually think Sebastain might be trying to play a little trick on Mengu here. And I think you might see a little land go, Emma, and then Mengu's going to play his Lotus field out and have no colored mana due to the Damping Sphere if we just hold. Oh, we're maybe not. We are going to slam.
Maybe not.
Okay.
We tried.
we tried. Yeah,
we tried.
it actually comes up a fair amount if you like do that play. That's something that we saw a lot back when the Underworld Breach was in the deck, and the deck was much more explosive. Yeah, and it stops plays like this from happening because Mengu now knows that he shouldn't slam the Lotus field. Where if the Damping Sphere isn't in play, Mengu will slam and maybe not have a basic. We just saw Sylvan Scrying get used, and we could potentially get Mengu off colors for multiple turns.
Of course, yeah. So Mengu did draw, I think he drew the Besieger, which is pretty big against the Damping Sphere.
Yeah, Mengu never lucky, picks up the Sylvan Scrying to find the Besieger, draws the Besieger. He's like, well, why did I use the Sylvan Scrying? Yeah.
What's it like being lucky?
Yeah.
So it looks like Mengu's just going to crack off that Sylvan Scrying once again. Probably going to find, what do you even find here?
I could imagine Thespian stage, another Besieger. Like, for all Mengu knows, Sebastian's using this as a bait Damping Sphere in order to, eat the first Besieger. We could get a lot of other utility lands like Otawara in our deck. It looks like we just went for the Besieger, but there's actually a ton of options with Sylvan Scrying.
For sure. Given Bant Lotus Field just has so many like toolbox lands, it just makes sense to, we already had the Thespian stage, so that's even better. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what Sebastain does here. This Damping Sphere is on borrowed time. And Sebastian's just going to pass the turn. And here comes that Besieger that we talked about earlier.
Yep. And that is a channeled ability. So something like Tishana's Tidebinder can stop because it puts a trigger on the stack. But something like this cannot. So, and it looks like we're just confirming too. Besieger is a very weird text. Basically, if your land has like the word island or plains written on it, you can get it. So, for example, the Surveil land, something Sebastain can get here. Something like Field of Ruin, we cannot.
Hallowed Fountain is just a nice find as well, but there's multiple things you can get. But yeah, Besieger has that weird wording, but the card itself, Besieger, is pretty powerful. And considering it's a channel effect, it's just really hard to get around.
Yeah, I would describe Boseiju as not weak if you had to maybe talk about it on a test, maybe. I feel like that is a strong card. Yeah, one thing too to note that we hadn't really talked about that I'm sort of just now fully realizing is Sebastain decided not to play Kikira, not to play Yorion. A lot of these blue-white control decks are going the Yorion direction because there's actually a lot of really strong cards you want to flicker and have those extra powerful cards in your deck for the mirrors, or they want Kikira to fight more over the aggressive decks and sort of have another body and be able to do things like Regal Caracol and Brahmas in the sideboard against those kind of decks.
So it looks like Mengucci is firing off that Lotus field with the Thespian Stage and Razorfurge Thicket in play. And Sebastain is going to Memory Deluge at the end of turn. Looks like, see what we get here. So it looks like a few lands, no more lies. And I can't see the fourth card.
Yeah, probably a spot where Sebastain actually doesn't want to miss the land drop. So if that, the fourth card looks to be a quick study. But yeah, Sebastain really just looking for pressure here. Mengu now has copied the Lotus Field. He has access to 7 mana. He is in like a pretty good position. So Sebastain needs to start working on closing this game out.
Yeah. Looks like Sebastian's just going to land go, as you mentioned earlier, Mason, just makes, force Mengu to have, all the answers. It looks like we're going to kick off a Balaged's recovery, bringing back Sylvan Scrying once again, getting a lot of mileage out of this spell. And looks like Mengu's going to fire off the Sylvan Scrying once again, hopefully. Or, oh no, it looks like we're going back.
Yeah, I think
Sebastian's going to think about carrying it, which he does with the No More Lies.
Yeah, I think it's really telling. Like, if Mengu wanted Boseiju, for example, to like fight over more things, he would have just picked up Boseiju. So clearly he has bigger goals in mind. So I really like Sebastain fighting over here, even though we haven't earlier in the game.
Okay. Yep, so it looks like we have another Memory Deluge. And I see Censor, March of the Otherworldly Light, Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, and I can't see the other card because it just went into Sebastian's hand. These Magic players play so quickly.
They really do.
Okay.
Which honestly, a lot of respect. If you're going to play control at events like this, you don't want to be the person getting draws. You don't want to be drawing. So playing a little quickly, I'd rather play a little quick and loose with my control deck than be the person who's 0-4.
Yeah, for sure. And I imagine if you say you're looking to play Azorius Control in the upcoming Pro Tour, having this event this weekend just allows you to get those like tabletop reps with just such a decision-heavy deck.
Yeah. You gotta remember too, at the Pro Tour, everyone qualified with Pro Tour obviously very strong, but also there's a lot of money and prestige on the line. Sometimes people play a little bit slower than normal because you don't want to be at your Pro Tour and throw it all away. So playing something like Control, you need to be crisp and efficient.
Yeah, takes a lot of practice, and unfortunately, not the kind of practice that I can do. It looks like what is.
We're pouring over the pages.
That's it. Yeah, I was like, I've seen that art. Didn't quite get there.
Ooh.
I see a Mana Confluence. Can't quite see what else.
I think we picked up both Silence and Dromoka, Emma.
Ooh, okay. Those
are good. Yeah, those are not weak in the spot.
I hear those cards win games.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how Mengu plays this because Mengu, can tell Sebastain definitely has counter spells. Sebastian's kind of thinking about all this stuff, right? He might be able to do something like fire off a Silence, and then Sebastain has to counter, and then Mengu might just be like, all right, play Dromoka, go, and set up to win on the next turn, and just, eat a counter spell now from Sebastain. I'm going to be curious to see if he maybe wants to hold that and just put the Dromoka into play and save the Silence for a later turn. Lots of different ways to play this out here. Really excited to see how Mengu wants to navigate this turn.
So we're going to start off with the Silence, it looks like. Yep, so here comes the Silence to bait the counter spell. because you have to counter this, right?
Yeah, this
You
is
literally
like
have no choice.
bait. Yeah, it's like you have a lot of choices here at our company. You can do this or that.
And Sebastain cycles a Censor to see a fresh card. And we'll see what happens to this silence, which is the biggest carrot I think I've ever seen in a Magic game.
Yeah, I agree. I like this too from Sebastain to cycle. Make sure that, like there isn't something you have that maybe is some weird out to this. Like a Narcissus Reversal would be really good against the silence. It would force Mengu,
Yeah.
Oh, and that's Test of Talents, Emma.
That is, yes. So get to look through Mengu's whole library and hand as well. It's a pretty good card to have as the control player and just rip out all those other silences. While the silence itself is not necessarily the card you want to hit, just having that information of what's in Mengu's hand and the cards he's sideboarded in is really valuable as a control player.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Sebastain knows what exactly he has to fight through for the rest of the game.
Dromoka is the big one, I think here.
Agreed. You see Sebastain even like point to it a little bit, be like, that one's in your deck? And Mengu's like, yes, I am here to fight.
I'm here to win.
Yeah.
And here comes the Dromoka. The uncounterable Dromoka, which is very relevant here. It's also like a 5/7 flying with lifelink, if I recall correctly.
It's huge.
It's
huge.
big.
Yeah.
I remember playing it in Dragons of Tarkir Standard way back when in green-white tokens.
It was a fun time.
That was a great time.
Yeah. My favorite Magic story, not a good time to tell it on stream right now, but my favorite Magic story ever involves Dromoka. So it's a wild card, we'll say the least.
Yeah. Okay, here. So Sebastain needs to figure out how to deal with this Dromoka.
Yeah, and
like permanently deal with it.
So luckily Sebastain does have Teferi 5 in hand, so we can minus on the Dromoka and put it a couple of cards down. If Mengu doesn't have something like Pour Over the Pages, that will give us a turn or two to get out of this. But we know Mengu's entire hand. We also know Mengu doesn't really have anything he can do on this turn. He's kind of just playing the 5/7 as a way to get it out. And then maybe we'll see a Hidden Strings to like untap the Lotus Field to Archdruid's Charm and grab, another land. But
here comes the lies.
Good guy Mengu reminding that Dromoka also says it cannot be countered.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dromoka really is like that little kid in your neighborhood who you'd play Magic with who's like, you can't counter this or I'm going home,
Yeah.
And so you're like,
pretty sure
I won't counter it.
I think I've had a few Commander games like that, to be honest. But yeah, this Dromoka is going to stick around for a while. And as you mentioned earlier, even though this Teferi can like deal with the Dromoka, it's still short term, right? That Dromoka is just going to keep coming back. It's like, how do you just answer this really troublesome threat as the control player?
Yeah, and I didn't talk about this when we were in the sideboarding, but Archdruid's Charm does grab creatures as well. We kind of highlighted how end of turn getting the lands matters. Mengu's actually going for the Leer here, which I didn't even think about, just really showing how much Mengu's thought about this deck and played it. And I was like, oh, he can't really do much. I think he actually is just going to win the game this turn.
Yeah. And considering Mengu knows about the No More Lies that Sebastain accidentally played thinking he could counter Dromoka, I think Mengu is pretty close to wrapping this one up. Just based on how quick Mengu is playing. If they're playing this quickly, they probably have it, right?
Yeah, if not, Mengu can put our overwhelming board position into play. All of our spells can be doubled. We have another, Archdruid's Charm. We can grab something like a Traxa, and that could like put us over the door. We now have two things that like make it so things can't be countered. So even if Sebastain has like, it's a fairy minus, like we know, we're gonna be able to fight through on the next turn too. So we're gonna see Mengu, if not win, put himself in a position to win on the next turn.
Yeah. So looks like Mengu gets back the Balisgeb recovery, bringing back the Hidden Strings. Play the Hidden Strings, untap some lands. It's just like motor memory for Mengu. He's just done this so many times. It's like it's really nice and sort of cool just to see a combo player just do their thing, TM, and it's just like second nature to them.
Yeah, it's really nice and appreciated. I'm curious what Mengu has in hand that he's setting up so much mana for.
I don't think it's Omniscience.
Yeah, maybe he's just floating a bunch of mana to make the Archdruid Charm into Atraxa easier to resolve. And he's just
that could make sense. Yeah, here we go. Yep. I hear Atraxa is pretty good.
Atraxa is not weak. I describe Mengu's deck. It's how I describe the cards in his deck. It's how I describe Mengu. Not weak.
Not weak typo is now Ban Lotus Field.
Exactly.
And here comes the Atraxa. Many cards will be revealed and drawn.
I definitely saw one pour over the pages, which that's going to be 6 new cards.
See a Vizier as well. I see a Ultimatum.
Yeah, I mean,
I see a lot of lands.
It's probably pretty telling if Mengu isn't putting Ultimatum in his hand.
Yeah.
He thinks that the pour is better, which is totally believable. I mean, seeing 6 cards in of itself is so much and giving you so much mana.
Yeah. And also you just have this Atraxa and this Dramoka in play, so you can just go beats. But I don't think we need to go that far.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. Like, if this turn ends, what is Sebastain going to do? Like, maybe you leave in one Supreme Verdict because you think that stuff like Dramoka plus Leader setups and passing can happen. But it's like, all right, well, if you do that, you're like kind of tapping out again. Like, and Mengu sculpted a perfect hand probably. So how are you going to win?
Yeah. So Mengu continues to go through the motions, trying to find the combo. It's like this Ban Lotus Field is very strong, and Lotus Field's been a strong Pioneer deck for quite some time now, hasn't it, Mason?
Yeah, this is one of the decks that we see every time the Pro Tour comes around. It sort of pops back up again. Not always, performing the best or winning, but always sort of gets re-innovated. And it's clear the pros have a lot of respect for how powerful this deck can be. And we see players like Nathan Stroyer as well sort of default to this when it comes to tournaments as sort of their Pioneer deck of choice. And it has survived and been one of the stronger things to be doing from like a theoretical perspective since the format's inception.
Yeah. It is. I think Lotus Field is the kind of deck that does a really good job of highlighting how different Pioneer is to Standard and Modern. It's like it has its own identity now. So you have this really cool land combo deck that you don't really see in other formats. You have Twiddlestorm in Modern sometimes, but that's like super niche. But it's just really cool to see Pioneer have its own decks that are in its own format. It just gives a good like identity and charm, which I don't think we don't talk about enough when it comes to Pioneer.
No, it's true. It is a very different and unique format.
Here comes the omniscience from Mengucci. Just apparently Mengu's just playing Commander. You got Omniscience, you got Atraxa, he got Dramoka.
It's so funny that Mengu, though, he's like, all right, I don't need mana anymore. And Sebastian's like, yep. And Mengu's like, I'll untap 2 lands. Don't worry about it.
I've decided to end this game. And there's another Dramoka as well. I've noticed in his deck.
Yep. And I think what Mengu might be doing here is, I think we maybe untap the lands because we do have an Otawara in hand. So we can do something like reset the Atraxa here in a second in case we're starting to actually whiff. Because it looks like Mengu is dangerously close to whiffing if we didn't have all this mana here.
Yeah. And here comes the Chandra to close the game. I think we're pretty close to finishing this off now. Yep, there we go. That was a pretty convincing victory from Andrea Mengucci on Bant Lotus Field there.
Yep. And congratulations to Mengu starting off 1-0. Events like this, it's always so good. We're going to have 7 rounds of Swiss, I believe, today. So, getting those early wins are important. And congratulations to him. And we're going to have Mengu here for an interview in just a minute. 8 rounds of Swiss today, as I'm seeing on screen now. But yeah, I mean, what did you think of that match, Emma, like to start off the day?
Yeah, it was, not only is it really cool to see Andrea Mengucci play an NRG, which just doesn't happen. Like the game was just really one-sided, considering Control is really equipped to deal with the answers that Lotus Field can bring. So stuff like No More Lies, didn't really do a lot. And that Teferi in the first game, while you said it's a reasonable play to make as a control player because you want to dominate that board, you want to start drawing cards and accruing resources. Mengu was just like, nope, I'm just going to tap 2 of your lands with my hidden strings, and then I'm going to go off, and I'm going to make it more difficult for you. So it was really one-sided, which I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, I think this really shows the difference of like when pros dedicate a bunch of time for a pro tour and are testing a plan for a deck. They really understand sort of what are the key interaction points. What am I trying to do? What am I setting up? Mengu did not stop and think really until we got to the point of like, okay, I have 15 mana, or I'm trying to get to 15 mana. What's the best way to think through this? And sort of just knew like, okay, I'm in the setup stage. And the moment Sebastain taps out, I'm going to tap out the rest of his lands. I'm going to kill him. And like Sebastain, I think it makes sense to play the Teferi. If you're going to play the Teferi, you should play it as soon as you can. That way you get the most cards and, the less chance for Mengu to, punish you. Because let's say Mengu only has 1 hidden strings. Well, then it doesn't really matter, right? Like all these plays are kind of mute. But since, he had 2, got punished there and it happens. But I think there's a lot Sebastain can see and glean when he comes back to watch this feature match of just, we have to take that aggressive posture and even doing things like waiting a turn on the Shark Typhoon in game 1. Like if we cycle it on turn 4, it's now a 2/2 and that doubles our clock in comparison to getting the 1/1 out. So like, there's small little things that do matter in these matchups. And, when pros like Mengucci and them are testing for these big tournaments, they really don't miss any of those small edges.
Yeah. You can tell Mengucci's put a lot of time into this deck, and it's really cool to see, to be honest. Yeah, it was a good match. You got anything else to round out that round with? Like, it was just so one-sided. It's just like a lot happened in a short space of time, which is what happens with Lotus Field, right?
It is what happens in short space of time. Listen, I could talk all day, but it looks like Mengucci is here to talk, and I know that the people want to hear from Mengucci. So, Andrea, congratulations on your win. How you feeling?
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I was a little bit scared of not making any mistakes. It's new deck. Haven't played it very much, but so far it went well.
How do you feel about the Azorius control matchup with No More Lies as a Bant Lotus Field player?
It's not a hard counter, and this deck can make a lot of mana with Lotus Field and Thespian Stage and Sylvan's Crying, and also the Amulet. So when you feel ready, you play around all the mana leak, then you start tapping their lands, and all good.
All right, so really quick, everyone else who's playing the Pro Tour, take your headset off for a second. I'm going to ask Mengu a question. All right, Mengu, no one else who's playing the Pro Tour is listening. Don't worry. How do you feel about Lotus Field going into next week? Obviously, you're playing it here this weekend, so you're at least interested by the deck. We saw some pretty cool innovations in your deck list. So what are your thoughts about this deck?
Yeah, so yesterday I was playing a Magic Online League with Lotus Field, like a normal version, because I wanted to have more reps with the deck. Nobody wanted to play against it. And then last round, I played against the mirror match, but they had the charm. And I was like, ooh, maybe that card is actually very good in my deck. So last night, me and Dominic Harvey built it, and yeah, here we are.
Okay, I was going to say, I mentioned earlier in the broadcast we had other people playing it. It was Dom, so we might see Dom later in the day if he continues to do well as well. So there's a little bit of excitement. So it's a little bit of a brewski is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, but Dom changed some cards. I wasn't ready for like the very last second change, so I just submitted last night and went to bed.
Yeah, that is smart. How do you feel from playing with the card? Like, how has Archjury's Charm changed Lotus Field for you?
That was the very last match I played. Sorry, the very first match I played with it, and I mean, it can tutor a combo piece or the land, so I think it does everything for the deck.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. How are you feeling?
I love everything here, by the way.
You're loving the energy?
Oh, that's great.
The camera. I took some pictures for my own YouTube channel so that I could, take ideas. I really like the setting. And even this, yeah, I like it a lot. Very good.
We like talking to you, buddy. So how are you liking, like Chicago in general? You're having fun. Are you excited for the Pro Tour coming up in just a week?
Well, so far I've only been in the house. And then whenever I step foot aside, it was so cold that like my leg got cold. So, I'd rather, I prefer more warm weather, let's say outside, but inside the people are nice. The pizza is good so far, so
I was going to ask about the deep dish pizza.
Yeah, it was good. It was good.
It's good.
It was good.
Well, there
But
we
the
go.
company, everything. I mean, I'm like on a vacation playing Magic, so I can't complain. Everything that happens is great.
Okay, last question we'll take from you. The last one, once again, other people playing the Pro Tour, don't listen. It's just you, me, and Emma Mengu. Don't worry about the stream. What's your favorite card from Murders for Pioneer?
Well, it could be the charm, right?
Yeah, it could be. I like that answer.
I mean, I tested Amalia with the K's, the one that gains life, but I didn't like it. So
sure,
it's just the charm for now. But again, today is gonna be like the first testing, and then like the next days, we'll see if the deck is good or not. How it goes against a prepare control player, a Rakdos player. We'll see. Like testing.
Awesome.
Thank you for the interview. It was fun, and
very much.
Again, I look forward to play this tournament. It's super cool.
Nice. All right, well, we'll see you around, Mengu. We're gonna go cover a Lutri deck really quick from our Player of the Year, Steven Dykman.
Okay.
Bye. Right. Bye, buddy.
Bye.
So as I just said there, sorry to sort of bury the lead, but we are going to try and jump down live into our Game 3 match there. It was so great to talk to Mengucci and sort of hear his thoughts on the deck and his honesty, too. We were like, oh, he's clearly been testing the deck a lot. Obviously, there's a lot of He's like, nah, I'm good. I just got this. Don't worry about it.
And now we're going to see a Rakdos Lutri deck from our Player of the Year, Steven Dykman. To be honest, I wasn't expecting Dykman to play a Lutri deck, let alone a Rakdos one. So I'm really interested to see how this plays out. And he's also, this game is also tied at the minute. So whoever wins this will take the win.
Yep. Yeah, believe it or not, the Lutri control deck did take some time to win. Unfortunately, can't cover all of them here. But if Dykman does like he did last year, we're going to be seeing a lot of him today. He was not only our Player of the Year, but our Players Champion, winning, our end of year event,
which also qualifies him for the Pro Tour next weekend.
You got to wonder, Emma, is this his Pro Tour deck?
I wish it is, but I don't think it is. Deep down, I hope, because Lutri is great, and who doesn't love otters? But we'll have to see how this plays out.
He does get to run the gambit, right? If it is his deck, no one believes him. And if it's not, and someone does believe him, he gets to sewer them. So it's really high EV.
Yeah, this is like a really bold pick to have on the weekend before Pro Tour Chicago at a 10K event. But also it could be the fun pick, because sometimes you play these competitive Magic events and just play something that's fun. Not necessarily that's the most meta.
That's true. And, there is something to be said about like having a deck full of one-ups. We saw Collins Mullins do this at the regional championship in Modern last weekend. It can be sometimes hard to play around them because typically you have a lot of cards that are very redundant. Like I'll have multiple effects that are similar, but they do play slightly differently. And those slight differences, make or break the way you play around them pretty importantly. So
for sure. And Steven Dykman just played a Kalitas, Traitor of Get, which is a card I have not seen since it was legal in Standard. So it's one thing about these Lutri decks, you do get a little bit of throwback just to make all the one-offs. But one thing I do want to talk about for a moment is the resurgence of Is It in Soul with the release of Murders of Karlov Manor, Mason.
Yeah, the Is It in Soul deck is very powerful. Basically, it's very efficient deck that tries to put, a 5/5 into play early and then protect it with things like Stubborn Denial or use cards like Shrapnel Blast to get the last 5 points across in a lot of ways. And it's just a very fast and surprisingly resilient deck for a deck that is doing something of this nature.
Trying to see what Steven's doing, but he's playing. Oh, it looks like Steven has just taken the win with a Molten Collapse, I believe, taking that down there. So you heard it here first. Rakdos Lutri is 1-0 in this Pioneers 10K, which I never thought I was going to say today. But yeah, it's really interesting. How do you feel about the Lutri decks? Because as you mentioned, like Collins Mullen played it at the RC not too long ago. Do you think there's any are they actually competitively like really good, or is it just too nuanced due to the deck building restrictions?
So I'm going to put my love of Lutri aside and try and speak objectively. I think that there's something to be said about like the companions are very strong, right?
Yeah.
They kind of act as like an 8th-ish card in your hand. And Lutri is the one that I think is the hardest to figure out because when we build our decks, they're very disparate and they play out very weird and it's hard to get a lot of data on them. But the thing to really think about is Lutri is sort of the 9th card in your hand. I think that is its biggest appeal, right? When I pick up the Lutri and use it with something, I copy something else. And that is a big swing. So as our pool of cards gets stronger and stronger, and we don't hit that breakpoint of Modern where it might just be too powerful to be giving up so much to play a Lutri, I think there's something to be said about exploring decks that are like, oh, okay, I have just the right power level where this 9th card, I have the time to pick it up, I have the time to use it. So I think for now, I am optimistic that it is a potentially real deck. But yeah. I am sort of, acknowledging the fact that, hey, right now we don't have much evidence, but these, historically the companions are very strong. And the Lutri stuff, if you just have essentially, 4 copies of all the cards you want, just with different names, then Lutri is free.
Yeah, can't disagree with that. With that opinion. Who doesn't love the Elemental Otter?
Yeah, and speaking of who doesn't love Elemental Otters, who doesn't love the prize pools we have this weekend? Let's pull that up real quick and show what these players are playing for. There are a lot of dollars on the line in our 10K showdown here. You can see this on the left side of your screen there. Column $2,400 for first, $1,200 for second, $800 for third to fourth, $400 for top 8, paying out all the way to top 32. And then there's the points on the far right. If you haven't seen our events before or you watched last year, those points are what our NRG grinders are going to be really gaming for. The person with the people with the most points at the end of the year are going to make it into our event. We have 2 seasons going on this year, so we're breaking that up halfway through the year. Our top 3 players who have not already won an event are going to make it to our end of the year championship via points, and then the back half, the exact thing's going to happen. And we're having a much bigger championship this year. We'll show that later. And anyone who wins one of these events is going to be invited to our home store in Mundelein to play our end of year championship, which I believe is a $30,000 prize pool this year. We have really upped the game here on the NRG series. We love paper and competitive Magic, and we're so happy to give back to you. Also, make sure you follow this Twitch channel. That way you don't miss any of the action going on here in the NRG series. And we're going to take a quick break before round number 2. So don't leave chat. Go grab your water. We'll be right back. We have some more exciting Magic for you in round number 2.